Okay, we're in New York. It's early in the morning. I'm meeting a friend who's off camera for a walk before it's 9,000 degrees. I have a great guest today. He's a talented actor. Chris Pang is my guest on Reppin today.
Love Chris Pang. Love Chris Pang.
You know him from Charlie's Angels, Crazy Rich Asians. He's been in Joyride, and now he's got a brand new series on Hulu called The Seasons. The show is set in the gorgeous backdrop of Hong Kong, and it is a drama revenge plot. Chris is gonna come on, talk about his new project, tell us all about it, and he's gonna talk about all the lessons that he's learned and experiences he's had in his life. So meet this incredibly talented actor. He is Chris Pang.
Yeah, well, at the time when we were filming, Jimmy was, because we were like, we hope that kids can watch this and like all the things that we're talking about, right? That it can be inspiring, that can help people deal with their identity, all these things. And Jimmy's just like, hey, dog.
This is Jimmy O Yang, right?
Yeah. Jimmy, yeah. He's like, hey, if we just help one Asian brother get laid, then we've done our job.
Rough and rugged. Represent NY, hold it down for my peeps. New York. We rep the hardest. Hardcore. Nobody harder. Let them know. That's the way we rock it. Show me what you got.
Chris, first of all, thank you so much. I know that you have been on a whirlwind press tour with The Seasons and your character, Andrew Fung. Let's just be honest right now. He's his volume is like on 10. He's very in your face, he's very brash, and he's very unapologetic.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your interpretation of your character, Andrew Fung, and what kind of guy he is.
I mean, you kind of nailing it. You're using all the right words. I think that's very much the pocket that he's in. Right. He is quite abrasive. He is not a good person. He's quite despicable. And we get to know that about him from the get-go, which I love. But the thing that's really refreshing about him is, like you said, he's unapologetically himself. Right. He doesn't pretend that he's not an asshole.
Okay.
Or he doesn't have an inside-outside voice. He's just got that external voice, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it was so fun for me to not have that restriction and just be able to say the stuff that you can't normally say in life. When I read him on the page, I loved him. But I also realized immediately that it was very easy for him to slip into a very unlikable place. Mm-hmm. And so we had a conversation very early on with Yalun, the showrunner, of what do we do with this character? And our goal with him was to make him the guy that you love to hate. I think what makes him redeemable in the end is because he puts up this very prickly exterior. He's almost that toxic, male, ultra confident guy. And then as the series goes on, we start to see that facade crack. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, he's just a little bit insecure and he's trying to prove himself in this world. He just wants to be loved. And you get to see that in the quieter moments. Yes. And that's what I think makes him a really likable character.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's definitely challenges in Andrew. I'm glad you said it. He was a little bit of a dick to start with. Let's be honest.
Have you seen the whole series?
Huh?
Have you seen
the whole thing?
Seen the whole thing?
I've seen the whole thing. But I will say this, and this is to your point. He is the guy that you love to hate. There was one moment where it really just got me to a point where I was like, It was a quiet moment between your character, Andrew, and Madeline, played by Yvonne Chapman, where you, meaning your character, you were very vulnerable with how you were feeling. And it sort of wasn't, what's the word? I don't want to spoil this, but it wasn't sort of received.
That's where you see the real Andrew. There's actually a really beautiful moment. He does put himself out there for Madeline. Mm-hmm. Quite early on. Mm-hmm. And he wants to show up for her and he wants to be there for her, right? She says to him, it's all right, Andrew. We all know you're not that kind of guy.
Yes.
You can see it in his face that he's like, but I am that kind of guy. I
Yeah.
do want that. And it's that little innocence that sort of slips through
Yeah.
underneath all that prickly exterior. You see that there's a softy inside. That balance is what makes him likable.
Yeah, it makes him human. And I just thought those moments were played so beautifully between you two. Let me just say this. As a kid, I would have died if I had a show like this growing up. For you, I know you've spoken openly about your own challenges of growing up Chinese and then being in Australia. How did some of this lack of representation internalized for you as a person? Because this show for me is like, I'm looking at this and I'm going, oh my God, like there's this gorgeous cast, modern, sophisticated cast that is about a bunch of obscenely rich people. But for you to be a part of this, I want to kind of throw it back to what it was like for you growing up. The lack of seeing something like this. How did you internalize it as a kid?
It was a really difficult journey, I think. It's like, I grew up in Australia. I'm Australian, if you couldn't tell the accents.
I thought you were Brooklyn, yeah.
But growing up as an Australian-born Chinese, I think is probably quite similar to an American-born Chinese. Even our acronym ABC is the same. And as a kid, I just never really saw myself in Western cinema and on TV, right? I never really found people and faces, characters that I could look up to and that made me proud to be who I was. I knew very early on, even though I might not have understood what it meant, that I was different. I looked different.
Yeah.
I think I was the only Asian kid in my class. And I used to get into fights all the time at school. And I used to get bullied, and there was a lot of racist comments thrown around. And that was just what I had to deal with. And I didn't understand fully what it meant back then. I just knew that I was different. And then when I was watching films and TV, I didn't ever see characters that I could relate to or that I could be proud of, because even the ones that we saw, you know, they were always relegated to the background.
Right.
They weren't people that were the heroes. So I turned to Hong Kong cinema. I was very lucky. I feel very lucky. So my parents made it a point for me to learn Chinese. Right? My dad's from Canton and my mum is from Taiwan. And so I learned Mandarin and Cantonese. I was able to appreciate and enjoy Asian cinema. That really was, for me, my connection to my culture. And I really noticed it was quite sad for me to see my friends go on this journey too, because I had a lot of friends that didn't speak Chinese. And because of that, I felt Asian cinema was inaccessible to them. It's almost you reach this point in your life where you get to a crossroads. And you're like, how do I deal with my identity? Who am I? You're forming your personality and, you know, you're growing up and you're becoming who you're going to be for the rest of your life. And you kind of need to make a decision on what kind of Asian you're going to be. And it's so sad that we have to make that decision.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I don't look Australian. Australia is my home. It's where I grew up and it's where I'm born. But I don't feel like I'm Australian. And so what do I do with that? And my friends are like, we couldn't figure it out. And so I saw a very clear split in which way you went. And a lot of my friends just tried to assimilate as best as they could and be the most Australian and out Australian all the other Australians. But I was able to be very proud of my culture. And I think it had a lot to do with my parents are both martial arts instructors. And so I grew up in a martial arts household. And along with martial arts comes not just the physical side of it, but there's a lot of that respect, honor, culture that comes with it. Philosophy added to that, the fact that I was watching Hong Kong cinema and everything allowed me to really deal with that in quite a positive way. And I was very proud to be who I was. And I think the way that it affected me now on my journey is that it has become so important for me to represent Asian culture in Western media. That really has become my mission. And as an artist, I feel very honored and privileged that I can even be a part of that conversation. And so every time I get an opportunity to do a series like this, it's always special.
Right.
Like you said, this is something that you would have loved to see as a kid growing up.
God, yeah.
And same with me. This is what I didn't have. And so every time I get on camera and get on screen, it's an opportunity to give likeness to a kid growing up that is going through what I went through and what my friends went through. And I think that's why it's so important to me. To me, I think such an important part of diversity and representation is visibility.
Yeah.
You need to be seeing yourself reflected in the world around you to feel like you belong in this world. And that's what I didn't have growing up.
Right.
Even later in like the late 90s and early 2000s, we had this surge of martial arts movies. We had Jackie Chan and Jet Li going to Hollywood.
Yeah.
We had Chow Yun-fat doing John Woo movies.
Yeah.
Right. But they still never got to go. Like there's not one movie where Jackie Chan has a love interest in English, or Jet Li, he does Romeo Must Die, which is based off the most infamous, famous, absolute like core romance of all time, Romeo and Juliet, and he doesn't even get to kiss the girl in that movie.
Right.
I think it's a very complicated relationship that you have to deal with, trying to figure out your identity, where you belong. But for me, I think how that has manifested is that I now, it's thrust me on this journey where I get to be a part of shaping what it means.
Yeah. That's kind of huge. I mean, look, with all due respect to Jackie Chan, Chow Yun-fat, whom I love, he was my first crush, actually. Chow Yun-fat, come on, Mong Zhongyan, TVB.
They're both.
I also grew up on Hong Kong cinema.
I think A Better Tomorrow is my favorite.
It's pretty good. But you can't go wrong with Chow Yun-fat. But respectfully to those guys, and even during that resurgence period you're talking about, it's all very like action-oriented niche. It's always like kung fu fighter kind of thing. And I think for our community, there is a serious rollback right now that I feel is happening. The fact of the matter is that you and others that are leading, like Henry, Golding, the whole cast of, Crazy Rich Asians, certainly the cast of the seasons, is that you guys aren't quote unquote ass kickers. They're not just kung fu niche. You guys are the romantic leads. You guys are, the complicated characters. When you were growing up, you were talking about seeing this like fork in the road. Do you remember when you found yourself at that moment? What helped you make that choice?
I remember when I was in high school, there was definitely a period that I went through around the time when those movies were around too. And I was like, we never get the girl, and we're always like a joke. The Jackie Chan movies, like I love Rush Hour and all those movies. I love those movies, but you don't watch Jackie in those movies and be like,
he's hot.
Oh yeah, he's just this bumbling dude that goes through life trying not to fight people, and he just has to fight people.
Right.
Right. I think it was a gradual evolution. It was just maturing into my body, just accepting who I was and figuring out how I wanted to feel about my own culture. Somehow I had that journey, and it was around, I feel like it was around when I was finishing up high school, and because now you're figuring out your place in society and where you sit. I think it sort of forces you to deal with it. But again, I think what really helped me through it was a Hong Kong cinema.
Gotcha.
I think that was really it, because if I had just been watching American films, I wouldn't have any role models.
Correct.
But I had Chow Yun-fat.
Right.
And I felt like Tony Leung,
yes,
and Annie Lau, and all these guys that I was like, oh, okay, there are Asian people that can be the heroes and that can get the girl and can deliver cool lines and be the center of a story. And I think that's actually really important to see, even if it's just a movie, you go, "Oh, it's just a movie, and it's just a story and it's not real." It has a profound impact on you as a kid to know that you can be the center of a story. Yeah, I think it's more important than we give credit to a lot of times. And so that's why it's been a priority of mine to have an effect in Western cinema in English. And I've kind of resisted going to Asia purposely just because of that reason. Like, I talk to my friends who are actors in Asia, and I'm very envious a lot of the times because it's like, well, you can play any character. You can be anybody. You just play a human being.
Right.
Whereas every character that I play is an Asian character.
Yes.
Like, I am very envious of a lot of my friends who are acting in Asia, but then they don't get to be a part of projects like this that are in English that you'd say, hey, this is really important for the development of kids like myself who didn't have people to look up to.
Yes.
And that's why that's the rewarding part.
Yeah. I have to agree with you 100%. I was just going to say that's one of the reasons what makes the season so special is the fact that, first of all, from my perspective, this is an open love letter to Hong Kong because just the backdrop of it's incredible. And to see a show like this with the backdrop of Hong Kong being featured, a cast that is not about like nunchucks or anything like that. And like I said, there's no disrespect to any of those films. I love those films. And like you, I grew up watching those Hong Kong cinema. But I will say the differentiation for me is when I was growing up, I sort of compartmentalized. So I was like, okay, this is my Asian part. Then as soon as I went to school, there was sort of a compartmentalization for me when I was a kid. Seeing the seasons, it's an English-speaking show. The show is about obnoxiously rich people with this like suspenseful drama.
Yeah, well, I think the thing about that world is it's about Hong Kong.
Yeah.
It's not about Asian people.
Right.
And it's not specifically, we're not up there because we're Asian. It's because it's set in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is full of Asian people.
Yes.
And it's just authentic to the location.
Yes.
That's what makes it feel authentic. The end goal isn't to divide, right? It's not to say, hey, you have to be one or the other. It's really to unite, and it's to create an identity for Asian Americans or Asian Australians. Like, what does it mean to be that? And when I came to America, it was really interesting for me to see the conversations, or like hear the conversations and see what it meant to be Asian American. Because I feel like you progressed so much further than anything that I've seen in Australia.
Really?
We don't have that long of history. But I think the biggest difference is that when you talk about fighting for rights and fighting for identity, it's been done. You know, you've got a blueprint there, and we didn't have that in Australia. When I came to America, I felt like, oh, there is almost like a
roadmap.
There's a roadmap to follow, and you guys are doing it, and you're fighting for things, and you're coming together as a community. And I didn't feel that in Australia. And so I think that's very powerful. I feel like there is starting to emerge what it means to be Asian American. And going back to what you're saying, it's not one or the other. You don't have to choose.
Right.
We're creating something new.
Right. Can I'd like to recoin the phrase Asian American. I don't even think that's like the right phrase anymore. Can we just say contemporary Asian? And it's like,
why is it too localized?
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit too localized. And I also think Asian American means something different, vastly different to anybody that you speak to. Going back to the series for just a second, being able to see an American series with the backdrop of Hong Kong, with these contemporary Asians that are beautiful and sophisticated in this world, was so incredibly special for me. Because like I said at the start of our conversation, I would have never had the chance to see something like this. And then to hear, there were a few lines in the series where you guys started speaking Cantonese. I almost fell out of my chair because I would have
Do you speak Canto? Do you speak
I
Mandarin?
do speak. I speak 我講少少，但係我係香蕉啊。I'm beginning to forget my language. Banana. It's a derogatory term. So your Canto is probably very good. So to be able to see a show like this and to see some of your press junkets, you're speaking Cantonese about it, like this American show. It's like breaking all these cultural barriers. I thought was such a special thing. When you walked onto set, let's say for your first table read, do you remember some of the impressions and thoughts that you had when you first kind of sat down and saw everybody?
I was just really excited to be there. It was literally a dream come true for me to be able to shoot in Hong Kong. So I was just really excited to be there, and I knew who was coming there to be in the room. I guess it was very exciting to see everyone. It's a very international cast. Some are local Hong Kong based. Karina is a big star in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I think the thing that you feel when you walk into a room like that is there's just this electricity in the air, because I feel like you have gathered a bunch of people who have this unspoken united mission. All of us as artists are there to express something. When you've worked different projects and you've embarked on this journey as an artist, all of us have hit the same roadblocks and hit the same sort of bamboo ceiling or restrictions or been held back in certain ways. To a certain extent, we're all fighting the same fight of we want this representation, and it's important for us to represent our culture on screen and all these things that unite us that are unspoken. And so when you gather a group of people like that, there is a certain electricity in the room. That's the thing that I remember about that first table read more than the actual read. I think that feeling of electricity that was in the room was quite special.
That's pretty amazing to be able to experience that. You are very much a part of that shift. You've been in a ton of huge movies, but one obviously is Crazy Rich Asians, where it really sort of moved the needle. I want to take this opportunity to say this to you. I remember going to the Joy Luck Club with my mom and like seeing this film, and I had Janet Yang on, and it was amazing to talk to her. But since then, I didn't have a palpable sense of pride in being Chinese. It's not to say that I hated being Chinese. Let me be clear about that. With your movie, Crazy Rich Asians, legitimately, it was the first time in my grown-ass adult life where I walked out of a movie theater and I felt a palpable sense of pride.
Love that.
It was literally the first time, and it is really embarrassing to admit this, but I am going to own it.
It's not. This is beautiful.
So for you to know there were kids like us growing up that didn't have this, and now you are literally a part of projects that are shaping not just the entertainment landscape, but someone's own idea of what they are or who they are or their value.
Thank you for sharing that too, because that was beautiful. And I don't think there's anything to be embarrassed about there.
Thanks.
Because it's a journey that we've all gone on. I don't think there's one Asian person that hasn't at some point doubted their own culture or thought or wished otherwise for some sort of change or whatever. That's just natural. You go through that. I think it's getting easier now because we have these. We've got K-pop now, which is like, it's like suddenly it's kind of cool to be Asian. And
Is that crazy?
And like, I certainly remember when it was the opposite of that.
Yeah.
But to be a part of that conversation, I think is really the dream. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I went through that just like you did.
Right.
And like we were saying earlier, I saw my friends go through that, and I never, if I could help it, I would never want another kid to have to grow up feeling lesser about himself or herself just because of the way they looked and their identity and culture. That's what I want to change. And so when Crazy Rich Asians came out, we had hoped that that's what it would be. I think when we were filming, there was definitely a sense of pride for everyone that was there, and we all brought our A game. No one on that set didn't give 100%. You know, we were just bringing it. And I remember we were on set, and Nora, Aquafina, and Ronnie and Jimmy in there, hanging out, just like rewriting lines, trying to figure out alternative lines for jokes. And we had a great time filming, but we worked really hard to make the best thing that we could. And of course, John Chu's an absolute genius.
Yeah.
He was doing things in his head that we didn't understand. Like he'd be shooting things, and he's just a visual genius. I think that he can assemble these sequences together. And so everyone brought their A game, and we certainly hoped that it would be what it turned out to be, but we didn't know that it was going to do that until it came out and we saw the community unite. I don't think I've never seen or felt that before. I think that was the magic of Crazy Rich Asians, was that it inspired our entire community to unite, and it brought us together. It was something that we could all be proud of because it was a great movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was a movie that was authentic to us, and it felt like it was made by us. And it was for us. When Crazy Rich Asians came out, phone just started blowing up, and I was like, what is going on here? And I just started getting all these messages coming in of people saying how much they appreciated the movie because it was that story. And that was the most touching thing, because I got messages coming in saying, thank you so much. This movie was exactly the movie that I wished that I had when I was a kid. I was able to take my daughter to go see this movie today, and I was able to take my mom. And there were 3 generations of my family going into a movie that was about us. And I've never felt that before. And that just meant so much, because that's what we wanted to do. That was always the goal. And all the filmmakers really took a big swing to do that. Like when Crazy Rich Asians got greenlit and when we were making it, it was not an automatic win. It was a very, very risky move.
Hard fought.
Yeah.
Hard
Even
fought.
my reps at the time, I had an offer for another movie, and they were like, you should go do that movie because Crazy Rich Asians, it's a big risk. And so that we had achieved it in a way that brought our whole community together, I think was a dream.
When your team, who has been, experienced in terms of guiding and harnessing your career into the direction of your career, says this to you, what was your instinct to say, nope, I'm going to go do it? Like, what was it about you, Chris, that made you say, okay, no disrespect to my team, I hear you, but I know that this is to go with your instinct?
Well, it's everything that we've been talking about. It's that everything that I went through growing up has led me to this moment, and it's important to me. The whole reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is so that I can be a part of this conversation. And here is a chance for me to be a part of a movie that we hope can do that.
How does it feel like to know that you did and you continue to? Because that movie is going to continue to echo.
Yeah, well, at the time when we were filming, Jimmy was, because we were like, we hope that kids can watch this and like all the things that we're talking about, right? That it can be inspiring, that can help people deal with their identity, all these things. And Jimmy's just like, hey, dog.
This is Jimmy O Yang, right?
Yeah, Jimmy O Yang. He's like, hey, if we just help one Asian brother get laid, then we've done our job. And I think we did that.
Yeah. Well, that's another episode. We're going to go back to this. I also want to look at the tenacity and resilience and grit you've had to have, because you were talking about how Australia is very far behind the conversation with Asian representation, identity, so on and so forth. For you to come from Australia to LA, you still faced a lot of challenges. What are some of the challenges, and sort of what have you had to call on to still deal with a lot of the stereotypes that you face? Because I think in past interviews you have said that you're still stuck in the in-between, even in Hollywood at this point.
Oh, what did I say?
I'll paraphrase. You basically said you're, in terms of cross-border projects, they're hiring then just, let's say it's a Chinese movie, they're hiring just Chinese from the mainland. You're not Asian enough to be like in the movie that they want to make. Mm-hmm. And then here you're too Asian.
I think that was, there was a period where China was pumping a bunch of money into movies. There thousands of screens opening up in China, every left, right, and center. And so it became a big prerogative of Hollywood to build films for China. And at that time, yes, it was almost like the candle was being burnt at both ends for us, because we had on one side, it's already really difficult to get cast, and the roles are really limited. And so where do we stand in casting? But then when there were roles, they were going to Chinese stars, because we were trying to get those films into China. And so where does that leave us? Jobless, basically. I think that has kind of moved on now. What was interesting was after Crazy Rich Asians, we did have a slew of Asian films that got greenlit, right? Or Asian-centric projects. I guess the political climate right now, it's gotten a little bit more difficult, but I think we had a little bit of a window, we had an opportunity. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the things that got greenlit during that time were things that were developed in a time before Crazy Rich Asians, when the conversation wasn't about how do we make the most authentic project and something that we can be proud of. I remember when we were casting during that time, before Crazy Rich Asians, you wouldn't talk about how good is this role, this Asian role, and like, can we be a part of this series? The conversation was, have they cast another Asian person yet? Because if they have, then we don't need to cast for this series. We're never going to have two Asian people in one series, and like, you're not going to be in one scene together. That was the reality that a lot of these projects were developed in. And so they were already superseded and outdated. And then we're starting now to see, I think, projects that have been developed with more freedom and more authenticity, where we can push the envelope a little bit more. And these are the ones that we can be, these are the ones that we want to see.
Do you remember some of the challenges that you faced that were maybe hard at the time, but taught you something about yourself that you continue to call on today?
I think you learn every part of your journey is almost like a different stage, and you're going to have to learn different things to level up. It's almost like a computer game, right? I think some of those things that I've learned, I've learned that no one's going to give you a chance. You have to make your own opportunities. I think that was a big one, right? I think, especially in this career path, this is one of the hardest things you could ever do. And people always told me that, oh, you're gonna be an actor, it's one of the hardest things to do. And you don't realize how hard it is until you start doing it, because a lot of the things that make it hard aren't really apparent to you, and you need to live through them before you can understand them. Like you hear, oh, you're dealing with rejection all the time because you're going out for auditions and you're not going to get them, right? And so now you're sitting there and you're just waiting. When you move to LA and you're all starry-eyed and you go, oh, I'm in this new city and this is where stars are born and this is where you can achieve your dreams and all this stuff. And everyone there's got a script. Everyone's walking around. Every cafe is filled with people talking about projects and that. And you're like, oh, there's this energy, there's this buzz in the air. And it doesn't prepare you to just wait. Because if you're not a waiter and you're not literally waiting on people, then you're waiting at home for an audition. And then when you get an audition and you've done the audition, you're waiting to hear back from that audition. Say you actually book that role. In the 1 out of 100 auditions that you do, that you've learned to accept that rejection, you finally book that role. Now you're waiting for that project to start.
This is true.
And then that project starts, and now you're at work waiting for them to light the scene and do all the work so that you finally get called to, hey, we're ready for you on set. Great. You've waited all this time and you go onto set and you film 2 takes. And they're like, we got it. And then you go back to waiting. And I don't think anything prepares you for the amount of time that you got to wait and stay motivated. It's one of the hardest things about this job, because there is no set path for you to follow in this career. There's no version where you say, oh, I've done this. Now the next thing I need to do is this. And if I do that, then I'll be progressing my career. There's no path. So it's all just uncertainty. All that's in front of you is just uncertainty, and there's no stability at all.
Yeah.
And I think those are the hardest things. And so I think learning to make your own opportunities and knowing that no one's going to give them to you was one of the big things. I couldn't just sit there and wait, because no one is going to write a project that has a character in it that looks like me, that is my age, that sounds like me and has my personality that they need to get me for.
Right.
That's also the character that I would love to play. When I realized that, and I started developing my own projects and writing my own stories, and that gave me agency over my time. And I think that has helped me tremendously to be able to deal with this career.
Yeah, it's a tough one. But to be able to land on a show like The Seasons and to walk onto a set, like I said, I can't even imagine what it's like, because I have never walked onto a set with all Asians. There's only one time in my 27-year career where I walked onto a set and I had like a predominantly Asian crew, and I almost died. I can't even imagine what it's like for you to be a part of Crazy Rich Asians that's done so much for the community. I can't even imagine how emotional that must feel.
Well, it's very empowering. Like, you have a dream of what you hope to achieve, and then when you're surrounded by that, it feels possible. And you see the steps forward. And that, I think, is very inspiring, and it's very empowering. And it feels good.
Yeah.
The season was even more of that, because we had a Hong Kong crew and everyone on set was speaking Cantonese, and that was just really cool to see. Like on I think Crazy Rich, everyone was Asian because it was filmed in Malaysia and all that, but there were so many languages on that set.
Right.
You know, when you film in Malaysia, you got Malay, Chinese, and then English, Cantonese. You got people from Indonesia there. You got like just this, there's about 10 languages on set. But when we were in Hong Kong, it felt like
Hong Kong.
It was just Hong Kong. Everyone was speaking Cantonese, and we're all sitting at lunchtime eating those the little boxes of like roast duck and stuff.
So jealous. So jealous.
Yeah, it was a very special time.
When you were saying about like connecting to your culture, when you're filming in Hong Kong, and all of this identity and representation that you've brought to us as audiences, what did it bring into your own life? Did it help inform your own identity anymore, or solidify your connection?
You know what? That's a great question. I've never really asked myself that before. I like to think that I have come into this with quite a formed, complete version of myself, but I think you're right. It's ever evolving. I got thrust into this conversation very early on because the very first movie I ever did was a Paramount Picture film that became the highest grossing film in Australia of 2010. And it was based off a YA novel that I had read in high school. And I played a character who was an outsider, this little Asian kid in this small country town of Wirrawee. And it's about a bunch of kids that go into the bush, and while they're in the bush, Australia gets taken over and invaded. Okay. And they come back and basically do guerrilla warfare and all this stuff. And it's really a coming of age story of these characters. But my character was this outsider Asian kid who ends up being an item with the main character, who's an Aussie girl.
Oh.
Yeah, and that was groundbreaking at the time. I didn't really ever see that. And so I was thrust into this conversation and had to think about this very, very early on. I was very proud of it. And so I like to think that I was already on a track and on a path from then. But if you ask me about it, yeah, I think it is ever evolving. And I think your relationship to your identity, that's how it's going to be. You're always going to be discovering new things about how you feel about it and what your relationship is to it and what it means to you. I think that's the healthy version of it, because if you stick to something, that's going to get outdated. Like, the world isn't the same as it was 2 years ago, even. Right. Like 2 years ago, I didn't know who BTS was. And
Me too. Or that they charge $900 a ticket.
The world is changing, and I think with that, your identity should be evolving too, and
That's fair.
the way that you accept your culture.
Yeah.
Right?
Food for thought, though, right? So listen, I definitely want to keep you, but I know that you have to go. So I'm going to ask you to just sign us off. Chris, if you could let me know who you are and what you represent.
I am Chris Pang, and I represent Asian males and Asian culture on screen.
I really want to say a huge thank you to Chris Pang for making time to come on the podcast. I really enjoyed my conversation, and I'm so grateful that he is taking his own personal experiences and fusing it with his talent and his projects to not just make great entertaining movies, but to really kind of shift the narrative, not only in entertainment, but in the world. Thank you, Chris. Check out his new series. It's on Hulu called The Season. And I'm like, look at this. I love this view. I know you're gonna wanna follow Chris Pang. I'll have his links in the show notes. My Gram Jam is Reppin_podcast. I'm now trying to keep up with all the cool kids, so I'm on Substack. That is reppinafterhours.substack.com. That's where the conversation can continue. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with one person. Subscribe, share, download, leave a review, all that good stuff. Thank you always for listening and for sharing your time. Reppin is a Suburban Outlaw Productions. Until next time, stand up and represent.
I think you're Reppin' rugged. Represent.